I've played quite a few Super Nintendo games, not as many as I would want to, but enough to know what I expect from the system. And let me tell you, there are some fiends out there when it comes to difficulty. That's the purpose of today's episode, to talk about my top 10 hardest Super Nintendo games. Unlike John Romero's Daikatana, these games will make you their bitch, and it's up to you to do your best to accomplish the feat of knocking these time-cherished titles down a few pegs. Now bear in mind, difficulty is a very subjective thing, right? What's hard to me might not be hard to you. So be patient with me, alright? Let's begin. Fucking zombies, man. This game is something else. We talk a lot about this game because it draws in different emotions from different people. Some people might say this is a leisurely game that you can play with your friends. Some people might say this is a challenging game that stands out amongst LucasArts' library, but I say I'd rather tap dance on a minefield than ever play this again. The issue with Zombies Ate My Neighbors is that there was this critical oversight in how the password system works. Yeah, it's great to have passwords to let you return to the stage that you're on, but you lose all of your items. Literally. Playing this game and beating it requires you to know exactly what you need for 48 stages. There are limited amounts of ammunition, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to paint yourself into a corner. Run out of ammunition when you need it, and you'll be up shit creek without a paddle in a barbed wire canoe. Alright? Makes sense? The first few levels might seem fairly easy, but then you get to the boss fights, and those bosses are bullet sponges, and now you're at such a disadvantage, it isn't fun. I hate this game. Everyone knows Battletoads. Everyone. Period. Dot. It's like a rite of passage on the NES if you want to have a genuinely bad time. And if you were a kid and you played it, you know that Battletoads is one of the most difficult games on the NES. But did you know that there's like 8 of these games? Yeah, and they're all harder than Jared Fogle at Disney World. The Super Nintendo entry Battletoads and Battlemaniacs is no exception. This game is incredibly difficult. And you know what's insulting? You can beat this game in like 30 minutes if you know how to do it perfectly. But more than likely, you won't do it perfectly and chalk it up to a slow-ass character that you're controlling. Remember oversized wall snakes? They're back. Remember the turbo tunnel? It's back. Remember the awkward wheel chase that requires damn near pinpoint precision? It's back too, except this time you're riding a pipe. This game is hard and you're going to fail a lot, but in some ways, I feel it's a little bit more fair than the original game, and I do like the graphics. Demon's Crest is an offshoot of the Ghosts and Goblins franchise, more specifically the Gargoyles Quest sub-franchise, and when I first saw it, I was captivated. It's a gorgeous game and Capcom should be proud. In the game we play as Firebrand and we have to find the 6 crests, the magical stones that each represent a specific element. Now Firebrand has 5 of these stones, but he wants the 6th stone because he's a pretentious douchebag. He ends up winning the fight for the 6th stone, but he gets his ass kicked so hard that this rival demon Phalanx, or however the hell you say it, sneaks up like Edge with his money in the bank briefcase and steals all of them, and now we have a plot. Demon's Crest is a tremendously difficult game, and honestly, it's a damn fun time. To really be effective at this though, you need to master all of your demon forms, and that takes a lot of practice. We've talked about Contra III before. It's a great co-op title, but as with most Contra games, it is incredibly difficult. That's just how Contra has always been. High action, low life, high risk, subjective reward. Beating Contra on the NES, it's easy to me now. Super C was a challenge, but Contra III, ho ho ho, is a real nightmare because it's hard as shit. We have the traditional left and right motions like the previous Contras, but we also have this top-down perspective, which took me a long time to get used to. It was rough. The action was turned up, the music is an absolute jam, and it's a solid great time. And if we aren't having a great time, we could just use the 30 life code, right? No! Kutabare, America! Watashi tachi no natsu o sute kudasai. We got a 10 life code, and it's a different code than what you would think. It's not the traditional one at all. It's like a Hadouken motion forward with another button input. It just sucks because you barely get any practice before those 10 lives go bye-bye. I've not made it that far in the Ghosts and Goblins lineage because they're all kind of daunting to get involved with. It took me a while to build up the courage to tackle Ghosts and Goblins on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and after suffering through that, I was pleasantly surprised to have an absolute blast with Ghouls and Ghosts on the Genesis. I actually really enjoyed it. So I was like, it can only get better from here, right? Fuck no. Super Ghouls and Ghosts is the equivalent of deep-throating an immersion blender. It's a punishing, nonsense game that 100% will fuck you out of your time and patience. I don't know if it's just me, but Arthur moves so slow that even trying to do anything is a chore, especially when there's tons of sprites on the screen. The first time I played this, I played Chomakai Mura, which is the Japanese version. But when I saw the slowdown, I decided to pop in the American version to see, maybe is this just my Super Famicom acting up? No, it's just bad game design. So what results from that oversight is one of the most difficult platforming experiences you will have on the Super Nintendo. Now, the most recent game in this universe, if you will, was Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection in 2021, and while I've never played it, it does look incredibly fun, and maybe one day I'll get to it. I do enjoy JRPGs, and for a long time I tended to avoid them because grinding can be frustrating to no end. The 7th Saga is a grind fest, and it is really hard. I'll explain why it's so hard in a second, but first let's talk some plot. Right off the bat, we can choose one of 7 characters, and once you choose that character, the other characters will go off on their own adventures to recover 7 magical runes, which is cool. We're competing against other characters. Dope, I like that. As we progress through the game, we might even pair up with one of the other characters and then they act as party members. Here's where the difficulty comes in. In Japan, this is just another RPG with unique mechanics. In America, they gave us the Inner City 3 AM Circle K crackhead version that is incredibly difficult due to balancing issues. In combat, the enemy stats are through the roof, our stats are through the ground. They were reduced significantly. Now you might be like, oh, stop being a baby. It's a JRPG, grind and do better, get better gear, progress the story. Well, just so you know, those same characters you didn't choose, you don't know how the programming will make them behave towards you. Depending on the character you choose and the character you pair with, other characters might try to kill you for the runes you've captured, or they might try to replace your partner. And at any given time, your partner can say, you know what? Fuck this, and try to kill you as well. That whole uncertainty adds a unique aspect to this gameplay experience that I wouldn't trade for the world. I think almost every single version of The Lion King that involves platforming has historically been an act of God to beat. I've never beaten this, I've never played this, but I do have friends who have, and they swear that this game is just a bad time. Now, I have played the Genesis version. It may look cute, but then it throws more curveballs than Sandy Koufax. It's an incredibly punishing game, and it's punishing in the most absurd ways humanly possible. And you'll get used to seeing a game over screen. You don't get that many continues, and because of that, it'll take a lot of practice to make it far into a stage, just to fail and struggle to make it back. Simba himself is a little bitch, and the bosses have no predictable pattern. But the bosses are the least of my worries with this game. It's the platforming, it's dreadful. Combine that with dreadful hitboxes, and you've got an incredibly hard game on the Super Nintendo. Dad would always tell me, at least in the Genesis version, if I beat it, he would buy me a car. I was 15 then. I'm 31 now. I have yet to beat this. I don't think I've ever been more disappointed in a sequel than I was with ActRaiser 2. ActRaiser, the original one, is one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. It involves a mixture of god simulations with platforming levels, and it's hard in its own way, but very much beatable. ActRaiser 2 is a testament to the sins of mankind. They removed the simulation and went directly to non-stop action scenes, so I was already kind of like, what's going on here? But then I really got into the meat and bones of the game, and I realized you have to control your character damn near perfectly to avoid dying in the most asinine ways, many of which are tied to knockback physics. It's a dumb plot too, just avoid this one, it's really not worth it. Hagane is a rare game. You're going to pay a lot of money for it, and if you do, you won't be disappointed. When I describe this game to my friends, I usually chalk it up as Mega Man meets Ghosts and Goblins meets Shinobi because that's exactly how it feels. Hagane is a fluid game. It's incredible the actions and attacks that Hagane can do, from rocket somersaults to shuriken throwing. There's a multitude of weapons. There's just so many different ways to handle bosses, and in my opinion, this game is a genuinely good time. But it is incredibly difficult not only to play, but to buy. I personally own a repro card of this. It was given to me by a friend as a going-away gift before I was reassigned to Las Vegas, Nellis Air Force Base. But I do suggest that you check this one out, but just know, it's not going to be easy. I love this game. UN Squadron and Carrier Air Wing were both some of the first shoot-'em-ups I played on Twitch many years ago, and I do love them, but I also recognize how difficult they can be. Honestly, most shooters on the Super Nintendo, they weren't easy. Gradius 3, Super R-Type, Axlay, there's quite a few on the system. But UN Squadron stands out to me, and it's because of those death zones. Death zones are areas that I exclusively apply to horizontal shooters, and it pisses me off. It's one of the big reasons why I prefer vertical shooters. Now, don't take this game for granted. It might surprise you. Super Star Wars, The Empire Fists Your Ass is a more accurate name for the game. You know, we could have had a solid Star Wars game on the Super Nintendo, but Sculptured Software did a line of some serious coke before designing their SNES trilogy, and every single one of those games are stupid difficult. Where should I begin? A, I don't think anyone who made this game actually saw Star Wars. B, you have incredibly limited health. C, you have incredibly limited upgrades. D, it has horrible level design. E, the enemies are placed in such a way that you will take damage even if you make the slightest mistake. Combine all of these, and you have a recipe for one of the most difficult games on the Super Nintendo. I think what frustrates me more than anything about it is how inefficient the lightsaber is. They like to think that it's a glowing stick. It's not. It's a legendary and respected plasma blade that cuts people's arms off. Fucking dumb. I don't like this game because it's very much a fan service and it exists for the wrong reasons. Guess who made it? Sculptured Software, the same folks who made the Super Nintendo ports of Mortal Kombat 1 through 3, Super Star Wars that we just talked about, as well as Doom, right? At least the port. Remember how I mentioned before that they did coke when they designed those games? This is what happens when they got the super coke, the heavy stuff that you find in a Guatemalan mine. They were so strung out making this, that's the only rational way that I can explain just how shit the controls in this game are. The first few stages, it's whatever, they are what they are. But then we go to an absolute 10. The first time I got to the itchy and scratchy stage, I wanted to shit razor blades. I was pissed off as a kid, and I'm even more grumpy playing it as an adult. There's no saves, no passwords, it's repetitive as all get up, and the overall design is a mistake. At least we're finishing this list with a game that's actually really solid, Castlevania Dracula X. Now, quick history lesson. Dracula X is a remake of a game that was on the PC Engine, Akumajo Dracula X Chino Rondo, or Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Because it was on the PC Engine, it never saw an American release. It wasn't on the TurboGrafx 16 CD, which is a shame because that game is a truly challenging and rewarding Castlevania title. Dracula X is what we received instead. Now, fundamentally, Rondo of Blood is a better game. The CD medium allowed for far more interesting environments, enemies, mechanics, sounds. It was just a better experience. But that couldn't be replicated on the Super Nintendo. So in many ways, this is an inferior version. But don't let that dissuade you from playing this game. I'm a baby when it comes to stuff that's difficult. So I feel this is difficult, but it might not be difficult to you. To me, Richter moves very slowly, which in some ways brings me back to when Castlevania was actually Castlevania and not a Metroidvania. Those were better times to me. Those bosses can be a motherfucker in this game as well. And those are my top 10 hardest games on the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. That being said, I would love to hear your opinion on the hardest Super Nintendo games out there because I'm always looking for another unique challenge, so feel free to comment down below. Also, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button so that you can join my insane retro journey. We have a loving, warm community of video gaming enthusiasts that love to remember a time when life was just a little bit easier to live. Finally, the thumbs up button. In particular, that's the biggest thing you can do for me. It helps with visibility for the channel and the videos I work on daily. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortifier out.